All right, I know we're waiting for other people, so we'll let them come in as it goes on here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 5th meeting of the Rocklin Zoning Board of Appeals. All members are attending remotely at this point. Myself, Mr. Tim Haynes, Mr. Stephen Galley, Mr. Robert Baker Jr. Mr. Baker Sr. is out recovering from surgery. Mr. Tanzi, I believe, is not going to be making it. His wife is going to be turning his computer off. So right now we've got 3 voting members. Again, the voting members that I had, let me just pull up my list here. Thank you, Kim. The voting members as of last meeting were myself, Mr. Baker Sr., Mr. Haynes, Mr. Tanzi, and Mr. Baker Jr. So let's take care of this. Let's take care of the first things first. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
The second.
Second.
Okay, on that, I need a roll call. Myself is yes. Mr. Haynes
Yes.
and Mr. Baker Jr.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just read the legal notice. Notice is hereby given, excuse me, that a remote participation continuance hearing will be held at 7:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2021 via Zoom on the petition submitted by Lighthouse Development LLC, 59 North Avenue, Rocklin, Mass, to allow for a variance and or special permits pursuant to section 415.22, 415.22.A1, size and design of parking spaces, 415.22.A2A, parking setbacks in residential zone, and 415.89 and or 415.89.1 to allow an alternate size and design of parking spaces and the applicant to maintain a parking area in the front yard of the premises known as and numbered 59 North Avenue, Rocklin, Massachusetts. The property is located in an R2 residence zone. Zoning district, subsection 415-9 of the bylaw, and is further identified as lot 34-48-0 on the Rocklin Assessors Maps. The owner of the property is Lighthouse Development LLC, 59 North Avenue, Rocklin, Massachusetts. A copy of this application is on file with the town clerk's office and is available for inspection during regular office hours and on the town's website. Okay. Who's here from Lighthouse?
I am.
Good evening, Mr. Rosa. My name is Adam. Thank you, sir. Good evening. My name is Adam Brodsky, and I'm counsel for Lighthouse Development LLC. And you have met Ivy White, who is our Director of Operations, who introduced herself earlier.
Ms. White, how you doing tonight?
Very good. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for coming tonight. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt, but
No, it's no problem.
I appreciate that. I just want to take care of one thing real quick. At this point, we are down to 3 voting members. I talked to council, and because it's a variance, it's either going to be, if this goes through and we continue this meeting, it either has to be a 4-to-1 vote. Excuse me, it has to be either a 4-to-1 vote with 5 members are present, or it has to be 4, all 4 members. So what I can do is I can remove Mr. Baker Sr. From being a voting member, and Mr. Galley, I can step you up. So now you're a voting member. So we have 4 members, but it has to be unanimous. So you have Mr. Brodsky, Ms. White, you guys have the ability to, at this point, request another continuance to get all 5 members. Or we can go for it tonight, and if it works, it has to be a unanimous 4-person vote. It's up to you guys.
Mr. Rosa, would it make sense to perhaps continue with the presentation and revisit the voting? Because there may be additional information that you may need, which would obviously require a further continuance?
I agree with that. Members of my board, do you have any problems with that, continuing the meeting at this point?
I'm fine with
I
that.
had
With
no
this,
problem.
everything's good?
So that doesn't create a problem?
Right now, no.
Okay.
No. Because again, it's it behooves the applicant to wait for the fifth member to come in. But Mr. Brodsky is correct in thinking that once the presentation is made, we may have additional questions that may require a continuance. Don't know yet. Have no idea. I think he's got a point that we should continue with this meeting tonight.
Just a point of procedure, Mr. Chairman. By doing this, is Mr. Brodsky essentially reserving his right to request a continuance later on in the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. That is correct. And again, I'm trying to make good use of your time because we appreciate you volunteering your efforts. And I should, Mr. Rosa, introduce Ian Adams. Ian is a recent graduate from Suffolk Law School and is clerking with our firm until he passes the bar. And
Nice.
I invited him simply to observe, but I wanted to introduce him to you also.
Mr. Adams, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your recent graduation.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Brodsky, I'm assuming you're going to take lead on this?
Yes, sir.
Go for it.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. You'll remember that we are seeking variances to maintain an existing gravel parking area in the front yard of the property at 59 North Avenue. We need relief from the 10-foot property setback line, and we also need relief from the dimensional requirements for the parking spaces because it's presently gravel. We're not proposing to stripe it, and we theoretically can't meet your technical requirements for parking spaces. This matter was first heard on September 7th, and my associate Will Eads was present, and the matter was continued because you requested additional information. I wrote to you on September 28th to provide that additional information, and you also requested that Ms. White be present so that we have a representative here who can answer questions that I cannot. And very briefly, the answers to your questions were first, the building is primarily used for office space with a portion for storage. There are 10 people working in the office on a daily basis, but additional employees do visit for a short time to pick up supplies and the like. There are 6 parking spaces behind the building in the existing paved parking area, plus space for a box truck. The proposed parking area in the front yard is intended to be for 6 additional vehicles, so parking for 12 vehicles plus the box truck. And currently, there are 3 to 4 vehicles that are parked in the front yard on a daily basis. And as I mentioned, we're not proposing to resurface or stripe the front parking area, but in the future, if we're allowed to do so, we certainly would like to do that. And so that was the additional information that was requested from the applicant on September 7th. And again, Ms. White is available and I'm available to answer any additional questions you may have. I don't recall whether there was a detailed presentation on the elements that we need to prove for variance. I'm happy to address those briefly if you like, or I'm happy to stop at this point and answer any additional questions that you may have.
No, Mr. Brodsky, if you want to touch on that, on the criteria for a variance and how this property falls under that.
I'll be happy. Again, I did provide a detailed letter and I don't want to be repetitive, but I'll just touch on high points. First, we believe that there are unique conditions and circumstances relating to this particular lot that are different than others in the zoning district. As you can tell from the site plan, and hope you have that available, that it's an irregularly shaped, undersized lot with I think it's fair to say it's a historic, non-conforming building. In fact, the building takes up most of the lot. It's not accessed from North Avenue. It's accessed from Garrity Court, which is a private way. We have no ability to park on either Garrity Court or on North Avenue. There's no parking. So the parking is presently, again, at the rear of the property, and there is parking presently in the front yard, which Mr. Rubel appropriately identified as not being authorized, which is why we're in front of you. Everything is really non-conforming. The existing parking is non-conforming, regardless of whether you consider the front yard. The goal of the exercise is to keep this thriving business in Rocklin, because obviously if they don't have sufficient parking for their employees, they'd have to think about alternative locations. But they've been at this property for a number of years. It serves their interests. And they're asking for, I respectfully suggest, some modest dimensional variances to allow parking in the front yard. With respect to the second prong of the variance test, a strict enforcement of the zoning bylaw in this instance would deprive Lighthouse of the reasonable use of its property. While this is undisputedly in the R2 zoning district, the district is populated by a number of commercial businesses. Some of those businesses, as well as some of the residential properties, have parking in the front yard, and I presume is non-conforming, and I don't know whether they've all been authorized. And we respectfully suggest that yet another modest additional parking area in the front yard is, well, if not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, certainly similarly situated, and denying Lighthouse the ability to also park in the front yard would deny them the reasonable use of their property in order to run their business. As you know, the standard to prove hardship to the applicant for dimensional variances is a lesser standard under certainly the State Act under 48 Section 10. And so we believe that respectfully that the denial of relief here to allow this parking in the front yard would deny Lighthouse the reasonable use of its property. Third, the grant of a variance is not going to cause any substantial detriment to the public good. We've had this parking area in place for some time now. And again, we know that it's not authorized. That's why we're in front of you. So we're not suggesting otherwise, but it hasn't created any negative impacts. We continue to access the property via Garrity Court. There are no hazards to pedestrians. And in fact, there is a fence which provides a visual buffer to the nearest neighbor. And so as far as we know, and we have not heard otherwise, that there is really no substantial detriment or any detriment at all associated with parking of 6 additional vehicles in the front yard of this property. So given the fact that we're seeking a dimensional variances, we believe that we've met the burden of proof for that relief. So again, thank you. I'm happy to answer any additional questions, as Ms. White is also willing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. I appreciate that. I'm going to open this up to the board members. Mr. Haynes, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I happen to live around the corner from the building, so I see it on a daily basis. When 6 cars in the front, is there an actual parking plan for where the cars go and how what the layout would be to put those cars in? So it's not identified as spaces per se on the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. No, we didn't identify particular spaces because, again, it's a gravel parking area. Perhaps Ms. White can describe how they presently park there, and that might be the best description of what we're proposing.
We park 3 in deep. I'm sorry, 2 in. So there's 3 against the fence as far up as we can go, and then 3 behind them. And then if, we have to move them, then we jockey them around.
You basically tandem the spaces. The people are parked in, and so some people come and go, and the people who are there who stay during the day kind of park up against the fence.
Correct.
No. So the reason I ask about it is is there, we sort of took out some grass areas and things have been paved, and the buffer that's required has gotten smaller, and you're looking for variance, but we can't really see how many cars go in, how big the spaces are, how they park, and whether or not more or some landscaping, whether there could be some buffer. This happens to be a street that the sidewalk that's busy with kids walking to school, and so some buffer, and I think a little more than what's there might be nice, but I'd like to see what those spaces would look like. And there's just not quite enough dimension. So, for example, the distance from the building to the street. So it's hard to see how big those spaces are, how many cars could go in, where. So anyway, you get the idea. It's just hard to imagine. You know, it's 5 feet reasonable, the 10-foot buffer, maybe nothing against the fence, but a little more on the front. It'd be nice to know what those dimensions are.
Mr. Hayes, or through you, Mr. Rosa, could I ask Mr. Hayes where we'd like to see improved landscaping? Is that the buffer along North Avenue as opposed to the abutting?
Yeah, along the sidewalk. But well, basically, I'd like to see what the layout would be. So what 6 spaces, how they would lay out, what kind of space is left over. You've got some space to turn around into Garrity Court, but like having some maneuverability and having emergency vehicle access. So we want to, obviously are concerned about the safety of cars coming and going, but there's really, I think, just Matt's house in the back and then the Ruggerio's next door. I think that's it for that. I think there's just those 2 houses on Garrity. I think that's it for traffic.
Yes, there's only the 2.
Mm-hmm. So, but again, safety, it would be nice to see what we have for, if we knew where those spaces were, to see how much room you have to maneuver. The larger trucks do stop on North Ave, so I know it's just, I just saw the FedEx truck going in. So it's probably a regular occasion, so they can get in, but sometimes the tractor trailers just stop on North Ave and unloads and stuff. So they're at least not going into the space. But that's really, that's my,
I'm sorry.
so really that's my only question, is sort of like, what's the layout?
Yes, sir. We can provide you with more detail than obviously shown in the site plan, and we can provide perhaps some proposed landscaping so you can get a better sense of how we can improve that from frontage along North Avenue. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Sure, great.
Thank you, Junior.
And Mr. Chairman, through you to either Mr. Brodsky or Ms. White, I'm assuming based on, or by virtue of your application, the rear parking lot is maxed at this point?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you talk about 6 vehicles parking in the proposed front lot, are you talking about cars, trucks, a combination thereof, or?
We have cars, and a couple of our guys do have pickup trucks.
Okay. And what time during the typical workday would you anticipate traffic starting to roll into that front lot?
6:30 in the morning.
Okay. And I think you may have answered this in response to Mr. Haynes' question, or even to a comment from Mr. Rosa. Once the vehicles are in there for the morning, are they pretty much there for the day?
Pretty much, unless they have to go to a job site, and then they will, leave.
Okay, but in any event, you wouldn't anticipate a lot of traffic moving around,
No,
say between 6:30 and 9 in the morning.
no. As soon as people are in at 6:30 in the morning, they're pretty well settled in there.
Okay. Now, you acquired the property in 2007, is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And do I take it that up until, well, in the intervening 14 and a half years, the parking has been pretty much adequate?
Well, it's really never been adequate. We used to just
Okay.
park on the grass, but then we kept getting stuck.
Okay, all right. Since your acquisition of the property, has the footprint of the building changed at all?
No,
Um, you bear with me for 1 second. Yeah, I like the other members of the board, I think before I would be willing to vote on this, would like to see at the very least a plan that lays out the proposed parking as well as any buffer that you might be anticipating. So, but thank you for your answers.
okay.
Thank you, sir.
Baker, Mr. Galley, you're up.
It's more of a, maybe it's procedural, but would it be an excessive request to ask the parking layout for the rear parking lot?
Excessive, not necessarily, but it would be nice to see kind of how things are, how they are organizing things right now.
I'd like to see that. I mean, I don't know if it's not too much. I'd like to see that to justify the front at least, to justify the requirement, the need for it.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
No, I agree with you there.
And Ms. Ivy, excuse me, Ms. White will correct me. I don't think that's striped in the rear. It's just an open parking area.
We never really wanted to stripe it because we didn't want it to look commercial where we do have neighbors. The fence that separates the neighbor, if you're looking at the building to the right, goes down and around, and he actually has space to come out into our parking lot that we agreed on. So we can't, there's one spot there that we can't, but we never really wanted to stripe the front or the back just because it looks even more commercial.
Understood. Mr. Galley, you got anything else?
Well, just as a follow-up about the striping, I mean, and this is really a question for you, I suppose, just as an explanation. Would they have to stripe it, or could they just give us a layout just to show us how it's spaced for a potential parking out back on the layout if they would give us one? Because if we don't need them to stripe it, it would just be nice to see how they lay it out for, you know, theoretical spaces for the average vehicle that parks back there.
No, I hear you. I hear you. And again, it sounds like we're going to be requesting information from the engineer. So I think that we can take that into, I think the applicant can take that into consideration when he's talking to the engineer.
Thank you. I think we can do a typical layout without necessarily striping it, so you have a sense of where cars actually park. And we can do that both for the rear as well as the front. And we're happy to do that exercise.
Thank you.
What else you got, Mr. Galley? Anything else?
No, that's all I was thinking about based on what we got so far. Thank you.
Brings it to me. All right, first and foremost, your fences in the rear and on the side are substantially onto your property. Whereas if you put them closer to the property line, you would gain space in the back. Did you know that?
No.
Okay, if you look at your site plan, and if you talk to your engineer, those fences that as they're located and as they're shown on your site plan are substantially on your property, limiting your space in the back to park. That's number one. Do you have your site plan?
I don't have it with me.
Take a look at it when you get a chance.
I
Take a
will.
look at the fences along the right-hand side property line and the rear property line are substantially into your property, limiting the space that you have to work with. So that's number one.
Okay, just that fence was there when we bought the property, not that fence. It was, a previous
The
fence.
previous fence. No, I understand, because I also looked at Google Earth and I went back in time and saw this. So I appreciate the fact that you replaced the fence where it used to, where it always was, but you kind of limited yourself. And that's part of the problem here. So that fence is substantially on you. If you moved it closer to the property line, you would gain a lot of room in the back. That's number one. Number two, I see again, based on Google Earth, it's not really shown on the site plan, but when you go to Google Earth, there is the gentleman that's parking to the rear of you? So he's going through your parking area? Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Why?
Again, we were being good neighbors.
Yeah, but you're also limiting yourself on the amount of parking that you have in the back. I mean, I appreciate.
I
believe me,
know, I know.
appreciate being good neighbors and stuff like that. But does he have, Mr. Brodsky, maybe you can answer this. Does he have a formal easement to be able to go over that property?
I do not know, Mr. Rosa.
And at this point, if he's been doing it for 20 years or greater, he can actually take you to court and get a prescriptive easement to be able to do it, which really hurts you.
Right.
Mr. Brodsky can correct me if I'm wrong on this, and it's, if you continue to allow him to do that, he can take that piece of property from you, or at least the right to cross over your property. So that's another thing that you guys have allowed to happen that is a detriment to the parking that you have in the back. So that's 2 strikes kind of against the property right now.
So Mr. Rosa, I would point out that since the neighbor's been given permissive use to use that area, there's really no chance for either adverse possession or prescriptive easement. But having said that, we understand your point, Billy.
You know, it's just you're allowing him to do it, which is great. I love that. You know, I definitely appreciate the good neighbor aspect, but it's limiting your parking. It's limiting your use of your own personal property. And it looks like, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is his driveway directly at the end of the road?
At the end of Garrity,
Yeah.
he parks there, and he also has, I believe, 1 or 2 spots down Garrity to the left in front of his doorway.
Okay.
He owns both. I don't know if you realize, Rob, he owns behind them and the one to
Yeah,
the
he
right.
owns both properties. Yeah.
So probably helps him if you've got people parked in Garrity, he can get around too. So,
Right. No, I see that. I look at that and say, yeah, it's great to be a good neighbor, but you're hurting yourself, and you're coming to the town asking for a variance, but yet you have what I'm seeing on Google Earth, 2 full parking spaces that if you parked vehicles there, yeah, you would block his permissive access, but you may not need parking in front. So that's a problem.
How much space is there? I mean, is there enough for another 6 cars?
You're gonna have to talk to your engineer on this.
Okay.
You know, again, I'm looking at it, I'm just visually scaling it off. All I have is PDF. It's about 5 feet onto your property and comes even further in at the corner. So that's
Mr. Yes, Mr. Rosa, yes, sir. We'll take a look at that. If we were going to relocate the fence closer to the property lines, we would still be encroaching into your setback, for which we would still need a variance, but it would be a different variance than we're asking for.
Yeah, and again, I'm not speaking for the board. I think that we can work with you in the back. All right. It's an existing situation. It's far enough away from the general public that nobody's going to see it. I think that we could potentially work with you in the back to be able to utilize the entire situation, because again, I look at Google Earth, and you've got the box truck. And again, I don't know what the imagery date on this is, but it looks like you got the box truck parked right you've got a loading dock door sticking out the back of the building, correct?
Correct.
Okay, it looks like you got the box truck parked right in front of that door, blocking that door. So it's like, I don't even know how often do you use that? Do you use that?
We don't, because it's hard for, we do personally,
Yep.
but as far as deliveries, most of our deliveries come through the side door, or they'll pull the truck in back, but they don't swing around. There's just no room for it.
Okay.
You have a truck come in and swing around and back up to the loading dock.
So that portion of the building goes unused, really?
What portion of the loading dock?
The loading dock
Well,
overhead.
no, that's part of storage.
It's part of storage. All right. So
Yeah.
you're not using it as a door then?
we do use it as a door to bring in things from, if they come, they can't come in the side door. They have to come in the back door. I'm raising that up, 2 or 3 times a day, but they
Okay.
can't back up to the loading dock.
Yeah. No, that's understood.
And the box truck usually leaves about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and doesn't come back until, well, it varies. Sometimes 11, sometimes 3 in the afternoon.
Mhm.
So we have to keep that space open for the truck.
All right. And just again, where you're parking the truck, if you move the fence, you'd actually have space for a car behind it if we allowed you to stack park.
Well, the dumpster's there.
When does the trash get picked up?
Wednesdays,
At what time?
about 6.
And it's behind the box truck. What time's the box truck leave?
No, the box truck leaves about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. All right. You've got a very small lot,
I know.
but you knew that when you bought it in 2007.
Correct.
Right.
It's a beautiful building.
Of course, I
Unfortunately,
know it. I know the building. I know the building very well. So you got that. And again, I'd like to touch on the criteria for a variance. Mr. Brodsky, what's the hardship to the land again?
What are the unique conditions?
Yeah, what is the hardship to the land?
Well, maybe I misunderstood. The standard under the local bylaw is whether or not you've got unique conditions relating to the property that are different than other similar properties in the zoning district. Again, we have an irregularly shaped lot. It is
Actually,
narrow.
Mr. Brodsky, I'm going to stop you there. It's a parallelogram. That is not irregular. That's not irregularly shaped.
It's irregularly shaped in that it is narrow and long. It's not a conforming lot that would meet.
Pre-existing non-conforming lot. We have a ton of these throughout the town.
Understood.
That's-
Understood. And we have a historic building that's large and situated such that it takes up a great deal of the lot area. So it creates this difficult situation where we have, again, limited ability to park on the property at the rear, and which is why, again, we have been using the front yard, and we're not authorized to do that. That's why we're seeking relief. But similarly, we're using the front yard similar to how other properties are also using their front yards in the neighborhood.
Mhm. Well, I'm still trying to figure out how this fits the criteria of a variance. And again, when it comes to the lot shape, we have parallelograms, narrow, long parallelograms throughout the town. That's number one. Number two, based on the topography, it's relatively flat. It starts out kind of high at the road at about elevation 100 and goes back to the end of the property at about 90 to 99.8-ish. So you have 2/10 of pitch through the whole lot. It's flat.
We've never suggested that the topography is what's unique here. And again, your bylaw is actually broader than the state act because it's not only unique conditions relating to soil topography or lot shape. Your bylaw actually speaks about unique conditions and circumstances. It's a much broader standard than strictly under the state act. And as I said, if you look at this holistically, the circumstances we have, and again, we have a respectful disagreement as to the characterization of the lot. But there's no question that there are unique conditions and circumstances generally, given the fact that it's a historic building that everyone obviously wants to maintain. It's not like we're proposing to take down that building and build a more modern building that could facilitate parking. We want to make use of that historic building. And it's unusual in that you have access via this private way with no ability to park either along North Avenue or along Garrity Court. So we're sort of stuck where we are given these circumstances. So I'm not disagreeing with your strict articulation of 48 Section 10. I think there's a little bit more flexibility under your local bylaw.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Ms. Ivy, I have one more question for you.
Yes.
What happened in the company around between 2007, somewhere around 2017?
What happened to the company?
The reason why I asked is
We grew?
well, that's what I'm asking, because I'm going back in time on Google Earth, and starting currently, you max out the property. All right, you max out the property with parking. All right, but then you start going back in time, and let's see, where are we here? 19, you were still utilizing the property. You were utilizing the parking spaces. Again, 2019, very, a lot of cars in here. 18, a lot of cars. 17, there was no cars in the lot except for the box truck, front or back.
Oh, they had to be cars there somewhere. I've been there since. I've been there every day since we moved into the building, other than vacation and holidays.
All right. Again, I don't know when these Google Earth pictures get taken, but it's full sun, and the only car in the parking lot is the box truck.
Well, maybe a Saturday.
Very possible.
Or, yeah.
Because as you keep going back, there's still not a lot of parking. You used to park the box truck way in the back. That's 2014, 2013. You were parking the box truck way in the back. So it has to be a time when the box truck isn't working. Is that what I'm getting?
No, we could have put the box truck there for a number of reasons. The trash was going to be picked up that day.
Right.
We just, even the way the circumstances are now, we still have to juggle the schedule. The box truck can't park there when the trash is going to be picked up if he's going to be there later than 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. But we've always had at least 6 cars back there. And then since then, lucky for us, our business has grown and we have hired more people and running out of parking.
What I'd like to do is, if Mr. Galvin's got his ears on, I'd like him to address the variance request based on basically the historic building. And again, I just don't see how this works for a variance.
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you, Bob.
Okay, I didn't put my camera on because I'm sitting in my car. Look, I think that Attorney Brodsky has touched upon the elements of the variance. There are 4 different elements. I've been listening to the discussion, and the board's interested in looking at some additional information. I think that before you form any opinions as a board, you probably, where the applicant was willing to supply that additional information, I think you should receive that additional information. The variance standard is, as Attorney Brodsky said, slightly different than the state standard expressed in Chapter 48, Section 10. But we've only touched upon the first prong of the 4 elements. The applicant still has to show that she will suffer a substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, in the event that she's denied the requested relief, and that hardship is supposed to relate to the land. And then she has to also demonstrate that the desirable relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good or without nullifying from the purposes and intent of the bylaw. And what I think I would recommend that the board do tonight is if the applicant could give us a rough idea as to when they would have that additional information. I think the board should allow them to think on what you've all given them in terms of your questions and directions, take the additional information on another night, and then and only then, after you've received everything that they wish to submit, I think you should then decide whether to grant the variance. Now, Attorney Brodsky and I have tried variance cases together, so he's as knowledgeable as anybody that I know on it. And I'm sure he'd be willing to, when he has the additional information, kind of fill in any additional gaps. But look at it, it's very discretionary with the board. Because you find those circumstances here doesn't mean you're obligated to find it in all cases. Variances are typically not customarily granted, but they're granted in rare and unusual circumstances. And if you're convinced that this is one of those circumstances, then you can vote favorably and put conditions on it. If you're not convinced that the applicant has given you information that allows you to conclude that the 4 elements are met, then you can deny the variance. And that may very well be the end of it. But my advice to you is to receive the additional information that the applicant has indicated they're willing to supply. If Attorney Brodsky wishes to add anything additional when that information comes in, I think you should receive it, and don't prejudge it, because there may be something else that is apparent once they run the plan that they didn't already articulate. So I don't think you should prejudge it until you've heard all the evidence.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I agree with you. So, timing wise, what do you think it's going to take to have the engineer look at this and come up with some sort of parking configuration, just on paper at this point, to show how many parking spaces that you can actually get out of this?
But by the way, in the back parking lot where it's not striped, when the engineer does the plan, rather than showing a solid line for the parking spaces, they could show a dotted line for a potential dimensional parking space. That's what I would suggest.
No, I agree with that. When do you think? Again, you don't know Grady's schedule, so I know you can't. I know you can't speculate on that. But
So, Mr. Rosa, are you meeting once a month at the present time?
twice a month actually.
I'm going to guess that we need 30 days
30 days.
Because, as you well know, trying to get surveyors and engineers to do anything these days is incredibly difficult.
I take that very personally, sir.
In a good way, not because they're falling down the job. It's just incredibly busy.
Exactly. It's not
Mr. Rosa, I think he's complimenting on all the hard work that engineers and surveyors do.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin.
It's appreciated. I hear what you're saying, but if you think 30 days is enough, between Kim and Deb, what do we got 30 days out?
We have November 3rd, which is a Wednesday.
Right. Board members?
Yep. We've all weighed in on that date.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we get it actually. Who else is on the 3rd right now?
Excuse me?
Who else is on the 3rd?
Nobody yet.
Nobody yet. All right, well, then there you go.
Mr. Rose, I'd also suggest that we just get a extension of time from Attorney Brodsky because of the additional information, because remember, on a variance, the board has to act within 100 days, and we just want to make sure that we have enough time for everybody to act.
Mr. Brodsky, does that work?
Yes, I'll provide that in writing, that we extend the period of time for the board to consider and issue a decision.
Right. And on the continuance hearing, then potentially one more of our members will be able to show up, and at least that way we'll have a 5-member board.
Right, and then you could have them do a Mullen affidavit and watch the meeting and look at the information, and that person could sit on it as well.
Yep. No, I'm gonna I'll reach out to both board members and just tell them that just both of them watch the meeting.
Yep.
And then the affidavit, they have to supply that to the town clerk.
Yeah, sign the Mullen Rule affidavit that we have for the town indicating they've watched the meeting and reviewed the materials.
Okay. All right, before we make a motion here, do we want to go over kind of what with the key specifics on the revised plan? So there's no issues going back and forth. Mr. Galley, turn your mic on, oh, there it is.
Sorry, I didn't want to have background noise. This is a question about the back, really quick. Is a fence required on that property? Because I'm wondering, you were talking about if they move the fence and open up space, is a fence required? And if it is required, how far does it have to be from the property line? So if they want to try to create more spots in the back, just as
Technically, I don't know it. I don't think a fence is required per se.
Yeah.
There's always been a fence back there, and I think the applicant wants to maintain that because again, the idea is that it's a pre-existing non-conforming use in a residential area.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to cover up the fact that there's a parking lot back there.
Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah, I just meant like if we were talking about creating more space in the back,
Mhm.
they move the fence to do it. What are their options to move the fence?
They
We want to keep the fence, but
they can
move
choose
it.
to leave it on their property. They can
Yeah.
choose to leave it on their property by, let's say, 6 inches. All right,
Yeah.
as long as it's on their property, they maintain jurisdiction and they maintain the fence itself. If they get a signed affidavit from the neighbor, they could actually put it on the property line.
Okay.
So it's really up to them if they want to entertain that idea.
I'd be interested in that, finding what's available for the rear.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it makes to me, it makes the most sense to utilize as much of the property as you can before you go asking for relief. Right now, there is no reason why the fence can't be moved. If there's a major reason why the fence can't be moved, that's one thing. But from what I can see, there's really no reason why the fence can't be moved and gain more usable area in the back. That's number one. I'd like to see, again, not a parking plan per se, but at least on paper, how the parking goes on a regular basis. Also, I think that one of the things that the highway department is now requiring, as far as I know, is that all dumpsters are to be fenced in. All commercial dumpsters like this have to be fenced in. You may want to look that up. With building department. Actually, Mr. Rubel's you're on the line, and I never even opened this up to you. Mr. Rubel, do you have any questions for the applicant at this point?
No, I would just like to say in 14 years, I've had no complaints on the site. Also, I believe what the members say that we need some kind of parking set up on how everything's going to be and where the cars are going to be parked. But again, I've got no complaints on that site.
Have you heard, again, have you heard about the whole dumpster thing and how dumpsters have to be fenced in now? I mean, was that?
Board of Health's working with that.
That's a Board of Health regulation currently.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, the dumpster at this point is not fenced in. So that you may want to consider looking into as well. And then when it comes to the front, I think everybody, again, looking at the site plan, looking at where what looks like the edge of pavement is, it looks like it's a couple of feet away from the actual property line. In a sense of just protecting the people that are walking down the sidewalk. I'd like to see, I think everybody would like to see some sort of, maybe a 5 foot, some sort of buffer away from the sidewalk. Because again, I mean, it's one of those things, you got a kid on a bike, you got a kid on a scooter or something like that. he takes a fall, he ends up falling into your property, hits a car, something like that. I mean, that's, to me, that would be an issue. So some sort of parking, some sort of parking layout for the front. And that way we know what kind of variance that we can, that way we know how much of a variance you're actually requesting. Because as it stands right now, you're just asking to do it. We need to know how much of a variance you're requiring, or requesting rather. I don't think that's too much to ask, but again, I don't know what the schedule of the engineer is. Does any board members, is there anything else that we need to add? I have to be forgetting something.
I would like to toss in a couple more questions that I have that I'd like to see answered on a revised plan
Please.
with additional information. So,
Please, go for it.
so one is to sort of look at the building from the point of view of how much parking is required in our bylaw. So I think, so we're missing the square footage. So I think we look for commercial buildings to have, I think it's one spot for every 250 square feet and one spot for every 2 employees. So while we're talking about a variance or some use, it would be great to match that as close as we can to the building. Variance, if we grant it, will run with the land, and it would be great if they worked together. So the employee count may not be the same, but so it'd be great to know what's actually required by our bylaw and how we can either look towards getting you in compliance with the parking requirements or see how your parking requirements vary from what we usually look for. And then the only other thing I would say on the parking layout, I do want to see how you're going to park cars. Like I want to see where all those spaces are to see how buffers can be preserved. So I want to see like a real layout. And especially because there's 6 and we're looking for 6 in the front and 6 in the back, and the back is already so much bigger than the front. So it's very confusing. But I'll add one more thing to that, what I'd like to see, and that's where the snow goes. So when you're in a neighborhood like this, I want to make sure we've also taken into account in your parking lot that we've given you locations and a safe place to store snow, because that's probably a big deal for you as well.
It
in that
is.
space and dealing with your neighbors. So we want to
It
make
is.
sure.
Where do you, when you plow your parking?
Our lot.
The snow gets pushed up against the fence.
Right there, the fence is about, 5 to 7 feet onto your property line or over your property, onto your property. You're losing usable space.
Again, with the fence, the fence has always been there. I never looked into the fact that, is it on my property, the company's property, or their property?
Right. Now you know.
We actually thought it was the neighbor's fence.
Not anymore.
So, Mr. Rosa, Mr. Hayes, I did a rough calculation, but I did want to confirm this with Grady. The assessor's office has the building area as 3,830 square feet, although I don't know whether all of that is usable, which is what you use to calculate the parking area. And based on that rough number, we'd need 20 parking spaces to comply. If you allowed us 6 additional spaces, we would have essentially 12. I guess I don't know how we would count the box truck, but we did that. I did that calculation. I will verify that with Grady. I do have a question, and it may not be appropriate, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm intrigued about relocating the fence. Because if we relocated the fence along the eastern property line, I don't know if there would be sufficient parking along that side yard, not the front yard, the side yard next to the building. That would also require a variance because obviously we would be within your 10-foot side yard. But is that something that would be more palatable to the board than the front yard?
I can't speak for the board members, but yeah, that probably would help. But based on what I'm seeing based on what I'm seeing here, that left hand, that easterly side of the property, there's a lot going on there when it comes to storage.
Right.
Clay, can you speak on that? It looks like there's a bunch of stuff stored on that side of the building.
Yes, we store ladders there. We had gear for rooftops, safety gear for rooftops at one point, fencing for when we were doing solar jobs. So yes, there is stuff on the side yard.
Okay.
So that, again, I asked the question without really knowing the answer, and it may be impractical. I'm just exploring all avenues here.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, it makes the most sense. It doesn't look like it's taking up the entire section of it.
It goes from the front of the building to the back of the building.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely using a lot. You're definitely using a lot of it, but it probably could be condensed. And there's a lot of stuff in there that if you had, let's say, some sort of storage container that you put on the side of the building, you could probably fit it inside the storage container. That would bring up other issues, but you can condense it into one specific area and not spread out over the whole thing. And again, increase some area that you could park.
Well, we were actually looking to put a couple of storage containers in there for prefab work, but that's another story for another day.
Also another variance because they're taking into consideration just like a shed, just like a deck, just
Right.
like that has to be X amount of feet off the property line as well. So
That, again, we haven't even looked into it yet. We're one step at a time.
it's understood. It's absolutely understood. What else you got? What else you got? What else you got? What else you got? Let me just look at that. I want to look at the site plan one more time. Yeah. Consult with your engineer, consult with your surveyor. I'm looking at your neighbor's driveway, who you're allowing to park and go through your property and stuff. I'm looking at 51 North Ave and a good port, and it looks like a portion of their driveway is starting to come onto your property. So there are issues with the property that could be corrected that can get you more space to be able to work with. And I would think that that's something that you'd want to take a look at because you're asking us to waive things when you're not even using your entire property. So it is what it is, and again, I'm not going to belabor a point. Mr. Baker, did you have anything to add to this?
I don't. I think everyone,
Plan.
I think everyone else has covered anything I might want to say. So thank you.
Mr. Galley, you were the first one in. Mr. Haynes, you spoke your mind. I did the same. Mr. Brodsky, do you have everything that you needed to take to Grady?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I've taken detailed notes. So, thank you.
And again, I offer this to all applicants. If it comes down to it and the surveyor, again, Grady Consulting, I know them all over there. They have my cell phone number. If they have any questions whatsoever, have them call me, have them get in touch with me. They have my cell number. They have my personal email. They have every way to get in touch with me. If they have any questions whatsoever, I'm more than happy to help them out.
Thank you for that invitation.
Not a problem. At this point, I would entertain a motion to continue.
And we're going to.
Galley, I want Galley to do it.
I never have to do this, so
Well, guess what? Stepping up to the big boys table.
I'll make a motion for continuance.
Date and time specific.
November 3rd.
At? I heard you say it. 7:30?
Yeah, 7:30, November 3rd.
All right, I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second from Mr. Baker Jr. Roll call of the four of us. Mr. Haynes? Mr.
Yeah.
Haynes? Yes. Myself is a yes. Mr. Galley?
Yes.
Mr. Baker Jr.?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. All right, between Deb and Kim, we've got this all taken care of. November 3rd, 7:30. Be there or be square.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. I know this was a pain.
It's not a problem. If I'm not
Appreciate
here, I'd be in the office, so that's okay.
Taking up a parking space.
Taking up a parking space.
All right, what do we got? What do we got next, people? We got
Minutes.
I've got I think it was discussion of non-deliberative announcements and scheduling. I don't think we got anything to deal with for that, right?
Nope.
All right, well, we're good there. I saw the email. Kim sent out the minutes to everybody. I read it. I didn't have a problem with it. Was anybody see anything? Dates? Everything? Everybody was cool?
Good.
All right, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 21st as presented.
Need a second?
Second.
I got a second. Roll call. Mr. Haynes?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Mr. Galley?
Yes.
Mr. Baker Jr.?
Yes.
I've got a motion carries. Minutes have been approved. Everything's logged in. And anything else to talk about?
I'd just like to thank Kim for the comprehensive and detailed nature of the minutes that you presented.
Oh, yeah. I was very impressed.
I know I'm responsible for a lot of it, so thank you.
No, I don't. And Bob, don't ever think that there's a responsibility or that's bad or anything like that. I encourage every single member of this board, if you got a question, if you think something's going wrong, if you think I'm doing something wrong, speak up. Speak up. Everybody's voice is valid here. I have no issues whatsoever. I'll never find fault in anything. If somebody needs more information, ask it. It's very, very simple. I love you guys. So it is what it is. And I hope that my expression of love makes it into the minutes, because we haven't adjourned yet, have we?
No.
No.
But that having been
I'll
said,
be sure to add it.
Thank you. I need a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
I got a motion. I need a second.
Second.
I got a second. Roll call. Mr. Haynes.
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Mr. Galley.
Yes.
Mr. Baker Jr.
Yes.
Welcome if you got him, people. Thank you for all your hard work.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Have a good night. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.